All right, despite all the holiday cheer that you obviously see go on in the background, for those watching the visual copy, there's a lot of negativity, and I'm not going to shy away from it. Let's get into it.
I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get a no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard.
Here comes Danny Tusizawa, back to Baker, Baker with the fin. Kurt Baker in for DC, and this may well do it Old Glory with the try. The New Zealand Sevens legend, Kurt Baker with the cherry on top.
Can you believe it?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the On the Line Rugby podcast, a show brought to you by the Believe Sports Network. I'm your host, Micah Nagaishi, and welcome back. Sorry for the long hiatus. Had to take off for a little Thanksgiving holiday. For a lot of you, probably, were going to your families. Hopefully, all of you had a good past weekend. Rugby's still in the off season, but there has been a lot of developments, especially in America. So for all my international following, this is going to be a primarily MLR and USA dominant episode. Don't fret, more news will come as we follow, but let's get into it. For starters, I really, I've talked about this before in previous episodes, but I really think that the USA and really all leagues around the world need to start unionizing their players. It's kind of despicable that we've had, at least in the USA, multiple teams move, reshuffle, get banned, kicked out, collapse, just because of just dumb things. Whether it's salary cap considerations, whether it's debt collection, I think that the MLR at this rate is no stranger to scandal. And I think this is one of them. Toronto, unfortunately, to all my Arrows fans, has concluded operations and will not be competing in the 2024 MLR season, unfortunately, due to, by the looks of it, the passing of their owner and co-founder. The MLR hasn't really released a lot on this subject. Even Toronto hasn't. Based on a lot of what has been said, the league has worked tirelessly to get a lot of teams, players transferred over and money ideally allocated to the Arrows. But, with the way that USA Rugby's financials are, I would highly doubt that they really were able to make that much of a push, at least in that regard. Players are still left in the dark, whether it's financials, where their playing futures are going to be. I've yet to see a single Arrow player get sent out to another MLR team. This happened during our hiatus on the 19th. So since then, it has been about 2 weeks, and we haven't seen a single player get moved. There's a lot of talented players, not only in the academy, but also in the MLR side. And I feel like this is a gross misuse of what rugby is all about. We should all be taking care of our people, our families. These are the people that grow the game, not only in getting butts in seats, but also new players to come and get inspired to play. So when it comes to Canada, who has been one of the biggest importers of MLR talent into the USA, I feel like we've kind of left them out to dry, unfortunately, in that regard. And that really needs to change. Whether it's telling players where they can go, making sure everyone gets equitable treatment, help and support, ideally in maybe a trust fund or something like that along that regard, and on top of that, just keeping fans in the loop, whether it's, helping players, still do community efforts to keep fans engaged, where regardless of whether you say you're going to commit to keeping fans, in the city, at least of Toronto, with grassroots efforts in there, you're still going to supposedly try to keep your academy. I don't know how you're going to be able to support that. And at this rate, I would not be of the mind that Toronto will be coming back to the MLR anytime soon. I think they're going to need a massive buyout, someone with a decent amount of wealth in Canada, and I hope that happens soon. I would love to see them in the 2025 competition. I hope they can salvage their 2024, but by the looks of it, it's another doomed ship in the long 2023 that is killing of teams. We've had, I believe, Northampton, London Irish, we've had a lot of teams in the Premiership. I never thought it would really happen here financially to shudder away, but stuff happens, and we just got to move on. I just really hope and pray that the players can hopefully get a little bit of clarity on their future and will get supported in the meantime. But a lot has to be changed. And I think this is a bad look on the MLR, not only on a PR look, on a financial look, but also I think this just really breaks down a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about in their leaked article to The Guardian, whether it's about, debt collection in the league, because a lot of teams can't afford to pay salaries, or paying players $20,000 to play. I understand a lot of rugby is not necessarily the greatest paying compared to obviously like basketball, soccer, or the NBA, MLB, but we have to at least raise it up somehow, some way. If league can do it, union can. This goes for any and all nations, any and all clubs. No one can live off of the 20,000 wage that you get in the rugby space, at least in Americas. In New Zealand, I'm pretty sure it's in a similar boat. Guys, including myself, have busted themselves day in and day out to playing through injuries throughout the year. I think for all my players, we can all admit no one gets through at least week 4 without at least a little bit of a nagging injury, and more things have to be done, just from a players association standpoint and from a league transparency standpoint around the world. But that's really the bulk of the negativity and the kind of downer sadness that we have. Unfortunately, we have a little bit more to get through on the docket, including USA's ability to support grassroots. For those of you who are watching the visual companion episode on my YouTube channel, up the boys, my LA Furious 5 All-Stars have managed to finish regionals, and we are balling and looking to do a repeat in the spring for flag rugby. I think flag rugby has been the biggest engrossing part of what makes rugby great, at least in the American standpoint, because you can get into it from an early age without the worry of having, parents see those monstrous hits that they mostly see from league highlights. And it was a good turnout. My organization, Rugby LA, serves, I believe it's 50 schools with 9 coaches, myself included. And of those 50-ish schools, I believe after our 6 weeks in the fall at our end of the year tournament, we've had, I believe it was 25 to 27 schools show up, 6 in high school, 15 in middle school, and 9 in elementary school, something like that. And, it was a good tournament. My kids in elementary and in high school won. Props to them. For those of you listening, shout out to the boys, Dubtown all day, every day. But I think this goes into a greater overarching point of where rugby can go in America if we just worked hard enough to do so. When you look at the way that, say, for example, a New Zealand or Australia do more grassroots efforts, obviously, they don't have as much sports to compete with, but rugby to them is everything. And, for those of us who have played or are fans, we all have the same passions. We all have the same ideas and hopes and dreams of where this sport can go. It's still one of the, if not the fastest growing sport still in the US, if it's not overthrown by pickleball, unfortunately. But there's a lot of ways that you could do that. I think pickleball is a great example of how you can do it. They focus a lot, and I mean a lot, on grassroots, whether it's in commercial marketing, you have, families going out, community websites, all that things, places to get people allocated to teams more easier than what it is for rugby. For at least in the tackle space, most players, we already know, go to Instagram. Google's not really much of a help, for us old hats, maybe Facebook, Twitter, I wouldn't say is the greatest place, not even really TikTok. It's basically just Instagram and Facebook. And that shouldn't be the case for most parents or most kids coming out of college or venturing into the sport outside of college to find a team. It should be a better overall look, for us in Southern California, where I'm located. The Scarfoo site basically just doesn't really update. So it's hard to find teams, accurate standings, rosters, etc., places to contact. Sometimes you just got to roll up to a park and hope that something happens. And that needs to change, just because there is obviously, at least from my experience in this tournament in general, to train and grow the game and the flag level and non-contact level, that kids really love the sport. They love hitting on both offense and defense. They love getting the minutes. They love the running, the open field play, the ability to score at any moment and not stop play. I think that's something that's huge for a lot of kids, especially when you include kicking or, the like of maybe an occasional celebration here or there, but it's a start. And obviously we've had, let's see, at least in my schools in general, I've had kids all the way up to sizes groups of 40 down to groups of 3 that then grew into 27. The options have been endless, and it's really just been simple stuff. Obviously, after school announcements, bulletin boards, stuff for community newspapers, no social media done, and we managed to pull that off. So I think the USA and I think a lot of leagues in general can focus on what New Zealand and Australia have done. I'm sure England and the rest of Europe do this as well. They put their players in the community, whether it's doing grassroots efforts like, the occasional passing out of Thanksgiving turkeys, at least in America, or, in New Zealand, toy drives or relief efforts, or, you do fan meetups, meet the players. Clinics have been getting on a lot better in the US, but that's more for experienced players, for those who know what they're looking for. Like, for example, the Perry Baker or Charlie Purdon academies or Lester Spellman's camps. But for those of us who are just getting into the game, there needs to be a lot more done. Whether it's a community aggregate site that USA or the regional unions run that sets people with the right points of contacts into teams. I think that would have been huge for me when I moved back to LA. You have a bunch of options there, better social media presence, more players active in community efforts, community games. Largely published community games have been huge for Australia's, at least with the AFL and NRL groups. Like, you never see, and I've said this before, an Australian kid say that they want to be a Super Rugby star. They always want to be a league or AFL star. And it starts with how present they are in the community. They're always everywhere. Like in, at least in LA in general, yes, you have clubs, but in terms of like easy non-contact, easy to find places in every neighborhood, it is hard. You're either going to South County in the South Bay, you're going into the San Gabriel Mountains, you're going into the Valley, or you're going to Santa Monica. And that should be no way to divide up the amount of people that is in this big city that need a home for their sport. And it's sad to see that, and it needs to change. Just accessibility needs to be improved. And obviously that'll improve everything from financials to butts and seats for the MLR to even just the coffers of, their ability to delegate efforts to other things in USA Rugby. USA Rugby, at least since I've been playing in 2018, has had massive budgetary standpoint cuts. They've been bankrupt for a number of years. Obviously, COVID didn't help. And I think just from that standpoint, a lot of things obviously have had to get cut back for right reasons, but things just need to be fixed. And a lot of these are easy things that I think people just aren't looking at doing. They're just making a platform, whether it's for social media or not, and then just kind of leaving out to die with highlights, and that's really it. You need to get more out of what we're getting in the communities, and that's where it starts. It starts in whether it's elementary schools, middle schools, little clinics in the middle of a neighborhood park that may not be in the greatest area. A lot of the kids, at least from my experience, that have played with me, will be going on to the next level, whether it's in college, whether it's a men's club. And, it's just from little things like this. And for an underfunded program like Rugby LA to get this big is huge. And I hope more happens out of this and will change as Gus Pichot will take over regionals for the Americas in terms of financials and delegations back to where the community wants. I still think Gus Pichot should have been our World Rugby commissioner, but I guess everyone loves Bill Beaumont for whatever reason. Individually, outside of the World Cup aside, it's been pretty quiet on that front, but it needs to be better. And I can't wait to see what can grow, at least from that regard. In lighter news, the MLR has also released their new standing format for their conferences and league play. It's going to be a renewed 16-week season, which each team playing every team in the league at least once. you're looking at 3 conferences. One team from each conference will end up playing another conference, both home and away in a round robin. And the rest of the games will be held within conference, twice, obviously round robin, home and away. These are how the conferences really shake up. It's kind of interesting how they divvied it up. I probably would have did it a little bit different, but it is what it is. It is, as of right now, the West is now ATL, San Diego, Utah, and Seattle. Central is now Chicago, Dallas, New Orleans, and Houston. East is going to be Rugby United New York, Old Glory, Miami, and New England, and obviously formerly Toronto. I don't know how they would have fit 5 teams in that Eastern Conference to do all of that in 16 weeks, but it is what it is. Maybe that's what that's all about. Kind of a hot conspiracy theory, but it is what it is. As for the conference shakeups, I really don't think that LA, aka ATL, will make that big of a stride this year. I do have them as sleepers if they manage to get everything Cinderella correctly, but obviously that's a lot of interesting ebbs and flows in that regard. It'll take a lot to unthrow the standing 3 who have basically been the dominant people in the West, obviously in San Diego, Utah, and Seattle. San Diego has been on a fire sale recently of signing and also cutting players. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. Utah has been building effectively well. I think a lot of their draft class, for those of you who watched that episode or haven't, you should watch it because that is a great episode, have really grown, at least in that regard. And their academy obviously is insane. Seattle is probably going to be the winners of that division. They've reloaded greatly. Outside of the AJ Allen team trade, which I thought was a little strange, they did a great job of maneuvering around the salary cap and putting themselves in a good position to exceed in places that I didn't think they could in the back line. In that regard, in terms of numbers and rankings for that division alone, I probably would have Seattle up top, Utah in a second, tied for third. San Diego could probably vouch for that second place. If not, they'll probably be third. It's kind of a toss-up between the two, and ATL/LA would probably be last in that regard. As for the Central Division, I really hope Chicago takes it this year. They have the loaded options to do so, but I think the jury's still out on them. I would probably put them, just to be safe, in my second place ranking. I'd probably put Houston up at number 1. They probably should have went to the title last year, but such is life. They have reloaded very well, and they will be back, I think, in next year to 2025. Dallas, I think, will continue to grow in that regard, and they will fight with NOLA to get in that third spot. I don't think that NOLA will grow as much as people expect with their new coaching hire, but they drafted really, really well, and I expect a lot of their rookies to be starting immediately, if not within midseason. So they will probably jockey. It's their third spot to lose, really, and Dallas will probably, while still getting modest wins, will probably still have to eke out a spot at 4th in that division. As for the East, with Toronto gone, it leaves it in the 4-man race. I probably would have Old Glory up and first just because of how well they've done. I think that they really put it in a toss-up with New England and to where they could go. Old Glory drafted extremely well. I'm really proud of them in their draft class and their free agent signings. I would probably put New England at second simply just because New England's been in the final. They've been there before. They're playing really well. Despite losing their attack coach, they have a great staff and a great academy there in New England, funded by the Patriots to get teams going. I would have Miami in third place just because of all the South American bodies they have in the middle, whether it's Uruguayans, you have Chileans, you have your Argentinians. Those boys are going to come to play, and they are bringing a bunch of forwards coaches to muster up talent. Specifically, they're bringing in the Uruguayan forwards coach. Man, I am really excited for that, just to have him in a scrum format, because let me tell you, they will bully you just like Houston, and it will not be pretty, and I can't wait to see it. Miami has deserved a team for a long time, and they're going to ball out with this opportunity. I definitely think that New York will probably slide the most. Obviously they got, I believe it was third last year. They'll probably get bopped to 4th and last in the division with the loss to Toronto. New York has lost a lot. I think losing the uh, quarterfinal cup has really hurt them in that regard. They've drafted good, but not as well as the other teams in their division. And I think it is an uphill battle to really take over that Old Glory and New England spots. Miami would probably be their easiest opponent, and I even think that might be a slugfest in the trenches that I don't think New York is ready for. They're more of a back-led team, and I think Miami's just going to bully them. So, being that as I mean, those are my power rankings in that regard. I can't wait to see the MLR play this year. Again, with hopefully Toronto at the helm back in it. As for miscellaneous news, this was probably a big one for me. Just having Tyrone Jabori, he was a big figure in the Collegiate Rugby Championship and a huge first-round haul for the Legion to get traded to Seattle. Another thing, like I said previously, Seattle is just reloading in different spots. I think they really emphasized the opportunities that they're giving to their bench players with AJ Alatimu gone, and they're really investing in that back line. That's something that I think they really struggled with, at least in this year. Outside of a couple players, they really didn't have a lot of oomph in that back line that I think scared a lot of people. They obviously beat people with their consistency and their ability to play in the numbers, and especially with their forward pack, given that Rickard Hadding, the captain, despite being out for a majority of the year with, I believe it was a bad back, came back and still led the Seawolves in tries scored. I think that's huge. So bringing in Jabori, who was a figure in that championship game through running great support lines and his speed in general, will be an effective effort at shoring up that skinnier 12 to wing spot. He can also play 15 if they decide to slot in there. I would tell him to bulk up though, just because that Western Conference is full of big boys and that will get physical real quickly. It's unknown. They don't really publish what salary cap considerations they may have given. Perhaps, the Legion is a little over the cap in terms of making sure that Nate Augsburg is a little happy and all the boys in that forward pack are ready to roll. So the Legion are leaning more towards their back line and more towards their support. And Seattle is just ready to reload and get revenge on them. So I can't wait to see that. But that's going to be it for me this week. Sorry for the over sad tone to start, but hopefully we'll get better news as the week follows. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Hope to see you next time. Peace.